Hello and welcome to Focus on Africa. I'm Clarisse Fortuné. Our top stories. Doctors for Queen Elizabeth, the head of the Commonwealth, expressed concern for her health and recommend she stays under medical supervision. Her family are on their way to be with her. Potentially world-changing, a new malaria vaccine offers 80% protection for 2 years. It could mean children dying from the disease could be ended in our lifetime.
It's such a difficult disease to make vaccines for, and the potential achievement that this vaccine could have if it's rolled out, it could be really world-changing.
Kenya held its 13th parliament session. Who will be the Speaker and Deputy Speaker for both houses, as none of the two political parties has won a clear majority at the last election. Also in a program, rising tides. Nigeria's largest city, Lagos, is sinking at a rate much faster than previously thought due to rising sea levels. And in sport tonight, Ons Jabeur will be seeking her second Grand Slam final when she plays Caroline Garcia at the US Open. Thanks for joining us on Focus on Africa from BBC World News. We start the program here in the UK as senior members of Britain's royal family have rushed to Scotland to be with Queen Elizabeth, the head of the Commonwealth, after her doctors expressed concern for her health. They said the 96-year-old monarch was under medical supervision but was comfortable. Officials said the heir to the British throne, the Prince of Wales, has been by her bedside at Balmoral Castle, where the Queen has been residing for the summer. The British Prime Minister Liz Truss, who was only appointed by the Queen on Tuesday, said the whole country would be deeply concerned. Anne Soyd is now joining us. She is in Sangana, in central Kenya. Tell us, Anne Soyd, what is the significance of where you are right now?
Well, I'm in Sagana in central Kenya. It is here in 1952 that the Queen came as a princess. And it is here that she received the news that she had become queen. And so it bears great significance to the Queen. And as you can imagine, people here and also across the continent are following very keenly the news about her health.
So you're talking about health. What can you tell us? What is the state of her health right now as we speak?
Well, people here, as we are following very keenly that news. Obviously, the Queen is a greatly admired figure here. She is a greatly admired leader, and she has played a big role on the continent. When she was here in 1952, came here as a princess and then became queen when she was here in Kenya. It was a very different time in history, and change was sweeping across the continent. And from that moment, she played a very important role in ushering in African countries, newly independent countries, into the Commonwealth, the body that she continues to head. And so people across the continent will be concerned about this news of her health.
Any reaction from officials in the country or on the continent?
Well, I have seen reactions from the Secretary General of the Commonwealth, and she has said that she is following with great concern this news, and she wishes the family, her thoughts are with the family, the royal family. And so, yeah, obviously this is something that is being followed very keenly, not just here, it's being followed across the world.
Thank you very much, Anne Soyd. And we keep monitoring the situation. Also, trials now in West Africa of a new malaria vaccine created in the UK show it gives up to 80% protection against the disease for 2 years. If approved by regulators, scientists say at least 100 million doses could be produced next year at low cost. Malaria, which is spread by mosquitoes, kills more than 500,000 people each year, most of them children. In 2020, there was an estimated 241 million cases of malaria worldwide. Africa is home to 95% of global malaria cases. Our medical editor, Fergus Walsh, has this report.
Carried by mosquitoes, the malaria parasite continues to have a devastating impact in sub-Saharan Africa, where it kills around 500,000 children each year. Now, a highly effective vaccine may be within reach. Trials in Burkina Faso in West Africa involving 450 children had already shown that 3 doses of Oxford University's malaria vaccine gave around 75% protection for a year. New results show that a booster dose at 12 months extends protection for a second year at up to 80%. The vaccine was developed at the Jenner Institute at Oxford University, in the same labs where scientists created a COVID jab in the space of a few months. By contrast, the malaria vaccine has been many years in development.
It's incredibly gratifying to make this breakthrough for malaria because it's such a difficult disease to make vaccines for, and the potential achievement that this vaccine could have if it's rolled out, it could be really world-changing.
We may not need to wait long for definitive results from larger trials. Scientists plan to submit data to the World Health Organization within weeks, with a view to getting the vaccine approved. The Oxford team has partnered with the Serum Institute in India, the world's biggest vaccine manufacturer, and says at least 100 million doses could be produced next year at low cost to make it accessible to many of the world's least developed countries. Fergus Walsh, BBC News.
And let's just bring you an update. A few moments ago, Buckingham Palace announced the death of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. The palace has just issued this statement, and it says the Queen died peacefully at Balmoral this afternoon. The King and the Queen Consort will remain at Balmoral this evening and will return to London tomorrow. Within the past few minutes, Buckingham Palace has announced the death of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. The palace said the Queen died peacefully at Balmoral this afternoon. The King and the Queen Consort will remain at Balmoral this evening and will return to London tomorrow. When the Queen came to the throne in 1952, the British Empire had already started to evolve into the Commonwealth, and in the early years of the reign, many of Britain's remaining colonies and dominions became independent countries. Our diplomatic correspondent James Landell looks at the Queen's relationship with the Commonwealth, an institution very close to her heart.
No British monarch lived longer or reigned for a greater span of years. Few presided over a period of greater change, and very few brought quite such a level of dedication to the role. Elizabeth was born on the 21st of April 1926, the elder daughter of the then Duke of York. No one could have imagined then that she would one day be Queen. But when she was 10 years old, her uncle, King Edward VIII, abandoned the throne, and her father became King George VI.
German bombers rained fire and high explosive bombs in their most...
During the Second World War, as German bombs fell on Britain, the royal family, Princess Elizabeth as she was then, her younger sister Margaret, and their parents, the King and Queen, came to symbolise the nation's fight against tyranny. Elizabeth briefly joined up. She was taught how to drive and service an army lorry. On the night Britain celebrated victory in Europe, the crowds gathered outside Buckingham Palace, and Elizabeth joined her family on the palace balcony.
In anybody's life, engagement day is a red letter day.
By now she was a young woman, and she'd fallen in love. Her engagement to Lieutenant Philip Mountbatten was announced in July 1947. 4 months later, they were married in Westminster Abbey. A year later, their first child, Charles, was born. 2 years after that, a daughter, Anne. But the king was in poor health. He'd been treated for lung cancer. When Elizabeth left for a visit to East Africa in February 1952, it was to be the last time she would see him. At the moment of her father's death from a heart attack, Elizabeth was in a game park in Kenya. She returned to London as Queen.
In a way, I didn't have an apprenticeship. My father died much too young, and so it was all a very sudden kind of taking on and making the best job you can.
Elizabeth's coronation took place in June 1953, and for the first time, television cameras were allowed into Westminster Abbey. The ceremony was broadcast to millions.
The moment of the Queen's crowning is come.
Elizabeth was sovereign and head of state, not just of the United Kingdom, but of Britain's realms and territories in every continent.
The Queen is greeted by the Governor-General.
She was to become the most travelled monarch in British history.
I want to tell you all how happy I am to be amongst you and how much I look forward to my journey through Australia.
It's estimated that on that first visit to Australia, 3/4 of the country's entire population turned out to see her. By the 1960s, social attitudes were changing. There was less deference. The monarchy was thought by some to be out of touch. The response, a groundbreaking television documentary. The film Royal Family showed the Queen working.
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, do you think you could bring up those papers that I was looking at yesterday?
Oh, I fit on there.
Save you trouble.
And relaxing with her family.
The salad is ready.
Good.
With this ring, I thee wed.
The 1980s began with a moment of great promise. The marriage of Prince Charles to the young Diana Spencer at St. Paul's Cathedral. By the early 90s, so much had turned to dust. Charles and Diana separated in 1992. The marriages of Princess Anne and Prince Andrew had already collapsed. And at the end of that year, the Queen watched as her favourite home, Windsor Castle, was seriously damaged by fire. Worse was to follow. In August 1997, Diana, Princess of Wales, was killed in a car accident in Paris. The Queen had remained at Balmoral to care for William and Harry, but to grieving crowds outside Buckingham Palace, it seemed as though the royal family didn't care. The Queen returned to London, and in a live broadcast, she tried to heal the breach.
What I say to you now, as your Queen and as a grandmother, I say from my heart. First, I want to pay tribute to Diana myself.
The Commonwealth was a cause close to her heart. She visited most of its members. But it was a visit to Dublin in 2011 which was one of the most significant of her reign. She was the first British monarch to visit the Republic of Ireland. She spoke about Britain's regrets.
We can all see things which we would wish had been done differently, or not at all.
The following year in Belfast, she met and shook hands with Martin McGuinness, a former leader of the IRA who by then was Deputy First Minister of Northern Ireland. It was another significant gesture of reconciliation. A Diamond Jubilee in 2012 confirmed the nation's deep respect and affection for a monarch who'd reigned for 60 years.
Mr. Bond, Your Majesty.
It was also the year when the Queen showed that she too could spring a surprise.
Good evening, Mr. Bond.
Good evening, Your Majesty.
Sovereign and secret agent, one of the highlights of the opening night of the London Olympics.
It's for me.
She continued with her public duties well into her 90s. There was further family turmoil, though. Prince Andrew was forced to withdraw from public life amid claims he'd sexually assaulted a 17-year-old, claims he denied. And then the Sussexes, Harry and Meghan, decided that they wanted to step back from royal life. They moved to California and gave a television interview in which Meghan made damaging criticisms of the royal family. They were unsettling moments, presided over by a monarch who showed that her sense of commitment was undiminished.
Together we are tackling this disease.
During the coronavirus emergency of 2020, she broadcast a reassuring message to the nation.
We should take comfort that while we may have more still to endure, better days will return. We will be with our friends again, We will be with our families again. We will meet again.
The death in April 2021 of her beloved husband Philip, after 73 years of marriage, was a moment of deep sadness. It was born with the stoicism that she so often personified. There was never any question of her withdrawing from the path of duty. By the time of her Platinum Jubilee in 2022, it was apparent that her health was deteriorating. But there was still room for a surprise, a chaotic tea party with Paddington Bear.
Perhaps you would like a marmalade sandwich. I always keep one for emergencies.
So do I. I keep mine in here.
Happy Jubilee, ma'am. And thank you for everything.
That's very kind.
This was a monarch at peace and enjoying herself. On the final day of the Jubilee celebrations, there was a final appearance on the balcony of Buckingham Palace. A much-loved monarch acknowledged the many thousands who'd waited to see her until finally it was time to go. There was an unspoken feeling that an era was drawing to a close. For decade after decade, Elizabeth II was the constant and reassuring presence at the centre of national life, respected as a constitutional monarch, admired within Britain, the Commonwealth and beyond. It was a life sustained by faith and driven by duty, and by the pledge she'd made on her 21st birthday.
I declare before you all that my whole life, whether it be long or short, shall be devoted to your service and to the service of our great imperial family to which we all belong. God help me to make good my vow, and God bless all of you who are willing to share in it.
And we'll bring you more on the announcement of the death of the head of the Commonwealth, Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. And a few moments ago, Buckingham Palace announced the death of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. The palace had just issued this statement. It says, "The Queen died peacefully at Balmoral this afternoon. The King and the Queen Consort will remain at Balmoral this evening and will return to London tomorrow." Within the past few minutes, Buckingham Palace has announced the death of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. The palace said, "The Queen died peacefully at Balmoral this afternoon. The King and the Queen Consort will remain at Balmoral this evening and will return to London tomorrow." And I'm joined now by our senior Africa correspondent, Anne Soy. She's in Sagana in central Kenya. So, Anne, this is sad news. How do you think this will be reacted on the continent?
Well, people are already sending their messages of condolence, leaders from across Africa and beyond. Those messages of condolence already flowing in. If I can just read some of them from the Prime Minister of India, Narendra Modi, says, "Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II will be remembered as a stalwart of our times. She provided inspiring leadership to her nation and people. She personified dignity and decency in public life. Pained by her demise, my thoughts are with her family and the people of the UK at this sad hour." Leaders continue to send their messages. So across the continent, across the Commonwealth, Queen Elizabeth was a greatly admired leader, and she will be remembered for her contribution. And it has spanned more than 70 years as head of Commonwealth, and people will have fond memories of her. She touched lives, not just here in Africa. During her celebrations of the Jubilee in earlier this year, I was in Ghana speaking to some of the people who were children at the time, and they were remembering when she went to Ghana and when she danced with then President Kwame Nkrumah, the first black man she danced with. She was a leader, a queen of many fasts, who was not afraid. She was well ahead of her time, and she made a huge impact. At that time, there were fears Ghana was going to cozy up to Russia, but that visit changed everything. So she touched many lives through her leadership, through her dignified leadership of the Commonwealth. People just admired her. You meet people and they greatly admire Queen Elizabeth as leader, and messages continue to flow from across Africa. If I can just read some of them. President of Zimbabwe, Emerson Mnangagwa, has sent his message of condolence. President of Ghana as well has sent his message of condolence, and we will continue to receive these messages from across the continent. Even at 96, this news still comes as a shock. And it's really because her leadership has transcended generations. She has had a huge impact, a huge contribution that reverberates across the world. And she will remain much loved in people's thoughts.
And Anne, you might remember, because it was not so long ago she celebrated her Jubilee. What do you think her legacy will be on the continent?
It's going to be huge, and it's going to be remembered for a long, long time to come. She made her mark in history. It was a long reign, 70 years, very admirable, and she carried herself with so much dignity and grace, and commanded the respect of people across the world, across cultures. It will be very difficult to find another like her.
Do you know what's going to happen next?
Well, we will wait. As the longest serving monarch of the United Kingdom, there's going to be a very elaborate process that leads up to her interment, and therefore we will wait for the directions to be given by the palace, and so the coming days are going to be quite intense, not just for the UK, but also for people who are following this across the globe.
Thank you very much, Anne Soy. And let me give you the latest. A few moments ago, Buckingham Palace announced the death of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. The palace has just issued this statement. The Queen died peacefully at Balmoral this afternoon. The King and the Queen consort will remain at Balmoral this evening and will return to London tomorrow. Within the past few minutes, Buckingham Palace has announced the death of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. The palace said the Queen died peacefully at Balmoral this afternoon. The King and the Queen consort will remain at Balmoral this evening and will return to London tomorrow. She died at 96 years old, and she was the longest serving monarch. And that's how he ends our program.